Welcome to the Sports Investors Daily Podcast, powered by TakingVegas.com. It is Wednesday, March 16th, and we have so much to discuss when it comes to the big dance. And we're going to give you a couple hints for this big dance in terms of against the spread, gambling, making money, and doing it smartly, which is what the Sports Investors Daily Podcast is supposed to be about. And again, we are powered by TakingVegas.com. TakingVegas.com has a bunch of free picks available for you over the next 4 days, starting with a couple of the playing games tonight. And we're going to speak about some of those games from a coaching perspective, but go visit TakingVegas.com and you'll get some free picks for the big dance. So there's so many different talking points when it comes to this tournament. You know, everyone is excited. It's almost like Super Bowl boxes, right? Like everyone you know fills out a March Madness bracket. Everyone you know in some way, shape, or form gets involved with a Super Bowl box. It's just what we do here. But in terms of actually betting the games, you know, straight up, the individual game, a lot of people get confused during this time of the year, and unfortunately, a lot of people get hurt. And one of the advantages we have here at TakingVegas.com and the Sports Investors Daily Podcast is we are constantly researching. You know, the normal person is out there working, you know, a 40 or 50-hour week and dealing with all the nonsense that is going on in our great country, because despite everything, I still believe we live in the greatest country in the world, despite all of the shortcomings that are going on right now. But there's a lot to deal with. There's a lot of stress. Obviously, inflation, gas prices are ridiculous. And again, this is not a political show. This is a sports show. But this is just stuff that's going on in our world. This vaccination stuff is now making its way into sports. You see that with Kyrie Irving, and also now, obviously, with the Toronto teams and the Mets and Yankees having to deal with this vaccination stuff. So a lot of stuff is creeping its way into sports and sports gambling. And a lot of people obviously gamble on sports to make money. Yes, and they gamble on sports to stay entertained. Yes, I gamble on sports for a living. And I always have the argument with people, like if I could do it, and I didn't have the greatest average in high school. I wasn't a great student. I was a student athlete. But if I could do it, basically anyone could do it. But I always make this point to people who wager and gamble on sports is it's important to not be a gambler. And people look at you like you have 9 heads when you say that. Like, I do not consider myself a gambler. A gambler is a guy that literally has to have action basically on everything that's going on. And I'm not that guy. You know, I want to pick and choose my spots. I want to get involved where I feel I have an edge. I want to put the chips in my favor as much as possible. And I do it for a living, and I treat it completely as an investment and as a business. No more, no less. I do not get emotional about these games. You go into it knowing that you're going to lose some tight games. You go into it knowing you're going to win some tight games. Like, people might laugh. They might not like this analogy, but I equate it to marriage. Like, you know you're going to enter into a union with a man or a woman, and it's not always going to be perfect. There's going to be arguments. There's going to be times where you're just at each other's throats, but you come together for the common good of the relationship and the family. Sports is no different. Sports wagering is no different. There's going to be some tough times. There's going to be losing weeks. There's going to be times where you're like, oh, what the hell's going on here? But if you get emotional about it, it hurts your train of thought. And that's when people start to lose money. So you have to go into it understanding what the pitfalls are. And I did a podcast on the pitfalls months ago, and I'll continue to educate you guys on that. But in terms of March Madness, right, in terms of the big dance, let's just go over some things that you can do to put the odds in your favor in terms of winning. And something I like to do is I like to look at the coaches. Because in college sports, it's not like professional sports where basically the same team has been there throughout. You know, in college sports, especially college basketball, I mean, a team that's in the big dance this year will be completely different next year and was completely different the year before. But what remains the constant are the coaches. The coaches and how they game plan, how they call a certain game, how they have their teams prepared. That is a constant when it comes to this time of year. So I really like to bet on or against the coaches, not so much the teams, because the teams are going to be different. Yes, A team like Kentucky is exponentially better than a couple of the teams they will see in the tournament. That doesn't mean they're going to cover the spread. And you're not going to lay 3,000 to win 100 on a team like Kentucky. And it's a waste of time. So let's get into that. Let's get into some of the coaches that are really, really bad. And we'll start over. I mean, there's a couple coaches. I mean, I was doing research for this tournament, and I'm like, man, this is eye-opening. How bad some of these coaches are against the point spread. And we'll start with Rick Barnes from Tennessee. He is a very successful coach. Had a great run at Texas. Is having a great run at Tennessee. They're a very good basketball team. But if you look at this, under Rick Barnes, okay, in the NCAA tournament, Tennessee is 1-5 against the spread. That means his against the spread record in his last 13 NCAA tournament games, dating back to when he was with Texas, and this goes back to 2010, he is 1-11-1 against the posted point spread. Rick Barnes from Tennessee has covered one game in the NCAA tournament dating back to 2010. That's a guy you might not want to take seriously, if you think about it. I mean, that's an eye-opening number. They lost in the first round last year to Oregon. They were favored by 8.5 points in that game. Now, they had a 3 seed this year. They're a 16.5-point favorite over Longwood. They're going to win that game. But are they going to cover 16.5? Man, I don't trust Rick Barnes in that situation. So there's one guy you might want to be wary of. Here's another guy that you got to look at, and you got to be like, okay, something's going on here. It's Jamie Dixon from TCU, another successful college basketball coach. Was good at Pittsburgh, has been good at TCU, all right? His teams are 12-12 straight up in the NCAA tournament. That's not terrible. 12 wins, 12 losses, 50%. I'm not going to kill you for that. But in those 24 games, he's 7-17 against the spread. 7-17 against the posted point spread. Here's a guy that just does not cover in big spots. So Jamie Dixon from TCU, got to be careful. They're a 1.5-point underdog against Seton Hall. So just be careful of that guy. All right, here's another one. And he's playing tonight. You have Mike Bray from Notre Dame. Once again, common theme here. A successful coach. A successful coach. In the tournament, over his last 15 games, he is 4-11 as a favorite against the spread. 4-11 as a favorite. Tough spot there. And they're favored tonight against Rutgers. So that game goes tonight. Again, Mike Bray from Notre Dame. Something to keep an eye on with him, the under. He plays low-scoring games. The under is 17-7-1 over his last 25 games in the NCAA tournament. So, be careful of that. Overall, over those 25 games, he is 9-16. But over his last 15, especially in the first round, 4-11 against the spread. I mean, that's terrible. Let's keep it moving here. Let's get to someone else. How about this one? Jim Laranega from Miami. Again, a good basketball coach. He is 2-6 in his last 8 games against the spread in the NCAA tournament. 2-6 against the spread. They're playing USC, Miami is. USC is favored by 1.5 over Miami. But again, Jim Laranega, a guy to be careful of because he's another guy that just does not cover point spreads at this time of the year. Let's go over to Greg McDermott from Creighton. The under is big in his games. Over the last 14 games in the NCAA tournament for Greg McDermott, the under is 11-2-1. But in his last 11 games for himself with that team, the Blue Jays are just 3-8 against the spread. I mean, he got guys that are just not covering. Over to Iowa. Here is one of my least favorite coaches in all of sports. Not because he's a bad guy. I don't know the guy personally, so I can't tell you he's a bad guy. I just don't like him. Because it's just you just never know what team is going to show up for this guy, and that's Fran McCaffrey from Iowa. I can't say he's a bad coach. It's just betting on Iowa. I mean, if you look at their games just this season, I mean, you just never knew what Iowa team was going to show up. And yes, They won the Big Ten. Nice job. They get a good win over Purdue. But during this guy's tenure at Iowa, he's just 3-6 against the posted point spread. And here's it even worse. He's 1-4 as a favorite. So, I mean, and look, I've never liked Fran McCaffrey coach teams. Ever. I've never liked them. One more guy to be careful of, Chris Holtmann from Ohio State. He wasn't bad at Butler. He was 6-1 against the spread in 7 tournament games at Butler, so that's not bad. However, since going to Ohio State, they're just 1-4 against the posted point spread. This year, they're a number 7 seed. They're favored by 1.5 against Loyola Chicago, who we all know is a pain in the neck. So again, when it comes to this tournament, the players are the players. They wear the jerseys. But don't get caught up in the actual team. Get caught up in who is coaching that team, what their philosophy is. Do they cover point spreads? And you got a guy like Rick Barnes, Chris Holtmann, Laranega from Miami, Holtmann from Ohio State, Barnes from Tennessee, Mike Bray from Notre Dame, Jamie Dixon from TCU. Oh, here's a guy I forgot. Ed Cooley from Providence. Now, they're playing South Dakota State, the Jackrabbits, who are 30-4, and they're on a 21-game win streak. During Cooley's tenure at Providence, they're just 1-5 straight up and 1-5 against the spread in the tournament. All right? So, that's another guy to be careful of. Now, I don't want you to think this is completely negative. I want to talk to you about some positives. And there are some good coaches out there that have good teams and cover spreads. And one of them is Jay Wright from Villanova. This guy covers spreads, which is all you care about. Okay, how about this? In the last 20 games that Villanova has played in this tournament, they are 16-4 straight up and 15-5 against the spread. That's a guy you want to be with, right? That's a guy covering three out of every 4 games. Not a guy you want to go against. Another guy you don't want to go against, Calipari from Kentucky. Kentucky is 31-8 straight up in the tournament under Calipari and 22-13-4, 9 games over 500 in the NCAA tournament. So those are some of the bigger names out there. You have a guy like Andy Enfield from USC. This guy has been really, really good covering point spreads. He went on a 7-0 run. 7-0 run. But he's 10-1 against the spread in tournament play. 10-1. So, I mean, that's a guy you want to look at from USC. You keep going down the list here. Matt Painter from Purdue. Not bad. He's 6-3 against the posted point spread as a favorite. 9-3 straight up. 9-3 overall. But 6-3 as a favorite. They did lose a game last year when they were number 4 seed. They lost to number 13 seed North Texas. They were a 7.5-point favorite. Purdue's a good basketball team. And, I think they did lose. Obviously, they did lose the Big Ten title game. But, that's a good basketball team right there. And there's a couple of the big names, like Mike Krzyzewski. Last 22 first-round games at Duke. The under is 15-7. Tom Izzo has been very good. He's actually the under in Izzo's last 7 games is 7-0. So he's a guy that you want to look out for low-scoring games. And Kelvin Sampson, the under is 7-3. And Kelvin Sampson's last 10 NCAA tournament games as the head coach of Houston. So again, when we go through the NCAA tournament, coaching is so important. Not just from the first round game, because you have 4 or 5 or sometimes teams have longer days to prepare for that first round matchup, but then turning it around. Once you play on Thursday, you got to play again on Saturday. Once you play on Friday, you got to play again on Sunday. What coaches do the best job of getting their teams prepared to play? Ultra important. And a lot of you guys out there who gamble on this, don't look at it that way. You look at the teams. And that's why a lot of gamblers get hurt. So this podcast, just a different way for you to look at the big dance. Just a couple different hints there that look at. I named all those coaches. And you could also catch this podcast on takingvegas.com. It'll be there in the pocket all over the place, Spotify, iHeartMedia, Odyssey, radio.com, everywhere we put this podcast. And we just try to help. So you can go visit takeinvegas.com, get a couple free picks for the tournament. And, this podcast will be there. Try to talk you through. All right, a couple other things that's going on right now. Kyrie Irving, he dropped 60 points last night against Orlando. That's good. Karl-Anthony Towns dropped 60 points the night before. I'm out on that. Kyrie Irving, no matter what side you're on with this vaccine stuff, and again, I am not trying to offend or piss off half the people, because that's what it seems like it is. Half the people are one way, half the people are. That's not what this is about. What it is about is this. Kyrie Irving made one of the most genius points you could ever make the other day in Brooklyn when he bought a courtside seat and showed up to the game against the Knicks. He showed up to the game. So let me get this straight. And look, whatever side you're on with this, you're all thinking it. Okay? It doesn't matter. There's a vaccine mandate in New York City. Okay? He can't show up to work because he did not get the vaccine. Fine. But he could show up in the building. He could show up in the building and sit there without a mask courtside. But he can't get on the court and play. A visitor who's not vaccinated can come into the Barclays Center and play. This is some of the most stupid reasoning of all time. Of all time. And Kyrie Irving made a genius point. And I'll tell you this much, right? The Nets got fined $50,000 because he was in the locker room. I have a serious question. And I honestly don't know the answer to this. I'm actually asking this question. Let's say the Nets get a home playoff game. Let's say they're in the play-in and they have to host a game. If I'm the owner of the Nets, Kyrie plays. Are you breaking a law? And you just pay the fine. Back in 2004, I worked for a marketer. And this is the funniest story. That marketer was fined for false advertising. True story. He was actually fined $130,000. And the following week, he did the same exact thing. He false advertised. And I went up to him and I asked this guy, I said, what are you doing? I'm young at the time. I'm only 25, 26 years old. What are you doing, man? You just got fined $130,000. Like, why are you doing this? Why are we doing this? This is just not going to be good. And I'll never forget what he said to me. Chris, yeah, I got fined $130,000. But my marketing ad brought back over $1.2 million. So I'll deal with the $130,000 fine. I'll deal with the $250,000 fine because I'm going to make money on a deal. And this light went off in my head like, wow, that's genius. You'll say something that's false, but it's going to work. And you're going to get sued or, fined for it. But that price isn't going to be as much as the money you brought in. So if I'm the owner of the Brooklyn Nets, I think I use that strategy. I just have them play. Are they breaking a law? I don't know. Are the cops in New York going to show up and arrest Kyrie Irving, or are they going to show up and arrest the owner of the Brooklyn Nets? I don't know the law. So I'm literally saying that out right now. Like, I don't know the law. But if you're dealing with a fine, because Kyrie Irving playing in a playoff game, let's say you get fined $100,000. Okay, but if you win that game and you get to host 3 playoff games or 10 playoff games throughout the course of your playoff run, or heaven forbid you win the NBA title, how much money is that going to bring back? So every time he plays a home game, let's just call it like it is. Let's say every time he plays a home game, he gets fined $100,000. Nice even number, right? The Nets get fined $100,000. Let's say he plays 10 home games throughout the course of the playoffs. It's $1 million. But having the building open for those 10 games, the advertising that you could sell, the concessions that you could sell, the ticket prices that you're going to sell, because the building's going to be packed, it's going to bring in way more than $1 million. $1 million to this. It's like a penny in the Grand Canyon for this guy. It's like a $20 bill to you and I. It's nothing. So I really think the Nets have to consider that. I'm not saying the fine is $100,000. Maybe the fine is $25,000. Maybe the fine is $200,000. Who cares? It's irrelevant. If it's not against the law, right, you pay the fine. have him play. Because if he doesn't play and you lose, now you lose all that revenue. And the fact that he can sit courtside in the building without a mask on, but he can't play in the game because he can't work for them? Are you out of your mind? And again, I don't care what side of the spectrum you're on with this. Pro-vaccine, anti-vaccine. I don't care. It's irrelevant. You're all thinking the same thing. Why can the guy show up in the building but he can't play? Like, it's getting old. That's ridiculous. And now it's gone over to the Mets and Yankees. An outdoor sport. Neither the Yankees or the Mets play in a dome. But if you're not vaccinated, you can't play. And it doesn't seem like last year the Mets didn't meet the 85% threshold with the vaccine status. And it doesn't seem like Aaron Judge is vaccinated because he got asked the question yesterday and he just went around the question. When if he was vaccinated, he could have just said, yeah, I'm vaccinated. So can you imagine? Can you imagine Aaron Judge can't play in about 90 games? Because remember, it's not just the 81 games he'll miss at home for the Yankees. It's the games he have to play in New York, and then he can't play in Toronto either. It's about 90 games that Aaron Judge can't play. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. But I'm sure if Aaron Judge bought a ticket, he could show up and watch the game. So, I mean, at some point, this is absurd. And look, this ties into gambling. How so? Well, future bets. A lot of people might want to bet the Yankees or the Mets to win the World Series. Now you have to think twice about that. The Nets. He just dropped 60 on Orlando last night. They blew the Magic out last night as a 10.5, 11-point favorite. But now they're home against Dallas. So every time the Nets are home without Kyrie, you got to be like, I might not want to bet this game. But every time they're on the road, you're like, okay, Kyrie's going to make a point. Let me bet them. Everything you have to consider here. And it's just crazy. But that is when it comes to sports wagering. And the last thing I want to touch on here, and I've touched on this numerous times here on a podcast already, is this fact. I don't care what company it is, BetMGM, DraftKings, FanDuel, BetRivers. It doesn't matter what company it is. It doesn't matter. These are the only companies literally in the history of the world, that you could put $5 in or $20 in and get a free $500 or a free $1,000 or a free buyout or something free. This is not. Go to Ralph's Ices and buy a cone and then ask the guy for another cone for free. See what happens. Go into Macy's, buy perfume for your wife, and then after you've made that purchase, say, oh, hey, I want 2 more for free. You get arrested for doing that. Like, it's the most outlandish thing. Go buy a house and then decide, yeah, you know what? After I buy that, I want 2 more. Or I want $500,000 off this mortgage. This doesn't happen in any walk of life. But when it comes to sports gambling, they are willing to keep you there. They're willing to dangle the carrot. Why? Because they expect you to lose. If this was a losing proposition for the sports books, they would never, ever do this. But it's not a losing proposition for the sports books. They want to keep you around. And now take it all the way back to what I said in the beginning of this podcast. They want you to be gamblers. They don't want you to be businessmen or women. They don't want you to be investors. They want you to be gamblers. They want you to bet first half, second half. They want you to bet every game on the board. Go look at the NBA board tonight. There's a lot of games. They want you to bet every March Madness, NIT, CBI, whatever other tournament they create to make money. They want you to bet every game. They want you to bet every half. They want you to bet every total. They want you to bet every player in golf. They want you to do everything you can possibly do to lose your money. They want you to be gamblers. How do you combat that? You don't be a gambler. You look at it from a select point of view. Do I have value with this team? Do I have value on or against this coach? Do I have value on or against this pitcher in baseball? Now that they got their deal done, they'll be playing April 7th. That's all. And whether you win or lose that night, it's honestly irrelevant. Oh, well, Chris, how could it be irrelevant if you lose or win money? I'll tell you how. Because if you win that night, okay, and you go bet another game that night and you lose, you made it irrelevant. If you lose that night and you come back and you win that night or you win the next night, you made it irrelevant. Okay? The only time it becomes relevant is when you're either winning a lot or losing a lot. Everything else is irrelevant. It doesn't matter. Right? So the only time gambling becomes a problem, there's a great movie called Let It Ride, Richard Dreyfuss, years and years ago. And he says to his wife, the problem you've had with me was never my gambling. It was my losing. That's the line. So if he was winning, the wife would never have a problem with him, right? Because he won. And it's a good thing. But these guys want you to lose. And the way to get you to lose is to keep you around and to keep you gambling on as much as possible. I'm here to tell you, Chris Hodge from TakingVegas.com, if you do that, you are going to lose. However, if you're select, if you're patient, if you're disciplined, if you use a money management strategy, you can and will make money. But it has to be done right. You cannot be emotional. Two things people are most emotional in this life: their family and their money. Sometimes vice versa, sadly. All right? Can't be emotional about money. Money's money. A win is a win, a loss is a loss. You just chalk it up and you move to the next day. And over at TakingVegas.com will help you with that. So we hope you enjoyed the podcast here for Wednesday, March 16th. It's going to be a great tournament. We hope to make you guys a lot of money. And we'll be back next Wednesday. But in that time, visit TakingVegas.com. We'll have free picks. We'll show you how to make money when it comes to sports wagering. We'll show you about the initial investment program. 1,000 can turn into 10,000, which is 4 plays, only risking your initial wager twice. That is explained at TakingVegas.com. And we'll show you how to treat this like a business. And we'll show you how to not be a gambler. If you're a gambler, you're going to lose. If you're an investor, if you're a businessman, you can and will win. Have a great Wednesday, everyone. I'm Chris Hodge, and I'll catch you back here next Wednesday. Enjoy the day.